She thought she was just tossing out a kid's toy to make room for her sleazy new fiancé, completely unaware that giving away that dusty PlayStation was the exact moment she signed her own eviction notice. Grace was a predator in nurses' scrubs. She spent years playing the doting caretaker, just waiting for my grieving dad to flatline. She inherited the bank accounts and the suffocating arrogance of someone who believes they've won the game. But as she stood in the foyer of my childhood home, her lips curling into a sickeningly sweet smirk to introduce her brand new boyfriend just 5 months after my father's funeral, she forgot one lethal detail. I owned the house she was standing in, and I was just waiting for the perfect excuse to burn her perfectly curated life to the ground. You could smell her perfume before she even entered a room, a heavy, choking floral scent that clung to everything, much like Grace herself. I was 22, freshly graduated with a chemistry degree, quietly observing the parasite attached to my family. My dad had left her 80% of his vast wealth, but for Grace, enough was never enough. She wanted the crown jewel, the sprawling 5-bedroom estate in an ultra-exclusive zip code, the estate with my name on the deed. Because I was away at college, she simply claimed it, acting like she already owned the place, treating my family's home like her personal resort. Her eyes constantly darted my way with a predatory, assessing gleam that made my skin crawl. When I stonewalled her sickening attempts to flirt with me after the funeral, she quickly pivoted to a greaseball named Ivan. Ivan was a walking cliché, slicked back hair and eyes that constantly scanned the room for things to pawn. The day I came home to pack my college gear, they were draped over each other on the sofa, treating me like a lost pool boy. Grace didn't even bother to sit up. She just waved her manicured hand dismissively. "Oh, sweetie, I gave that old video game console of yours to Ivan's cousin. You're a grown man now." It wasn't about the PlayStation. It was the absolute audacity. This gold digger had just handed my property to a stranger to score points with her new toy. I didn't yell. I just locked my jaw, gave her a tight smile, and said, "No problem, Grace." Then I walked upstairs and completely locked her out of my digital network. She was so blinded by her own ego, she had absolutely no idea the trap had already snapped shut. Weeks later, she casually dropped the news that she and Ivan were heading to the Czech Republic for a lavish 3-month honeymoon. She actually had the nerve to look at me with faux pity, telling me she knew I'd be finding a new place soon, but that I was always welcome to visit their house. I played the defeated stepson to perfection, letting her believe she had successfully bullied me into surrendering a multi-million-dollar property. Her eyes lit up with greedy triumph. Then she asked the fatal question, could I watch the house while they were away? "Of course, Grace," I told her deadpan. "I'll make sure the house is taken care of." The second their Uber pulled out of the driveway, the timer started. I didn't waste a single breath. I immediately listed the estate on premium rental networks, targeting high-net-worth professionals. Then I watched with a cup of hot coffee as a professional moving crew meticulously boxed up every single trace of Grace's existence. Her designer clothes, her guarded decor, her vanity mirrors, all shipped to a secured storage unit. I paid for 4 months in advance, generous considering her honeymoon was only supposed to last 3. I brought in a locksmith to gut and replace every single deadbolt in security code on the property. Grace thought she was flying off to celebrate her ultimate victory. She didn't realize she was already a homeless woman living on borrowed time. 2 weeks into their lavish European joyride, my phone vibrated aggressively against the marble kitchen counter. It was a FaceTime call from Grace. I let it ring 3 times before hitting accept, locking in my best poker face. The screen lit up with the French Riviera in the background. Grace was lounging on a private yacht, mimosa in hand. She didn't call to ask how I was doing. She called to gloat. Try not to trash the place while we're gone, sweetie. Oh, and Ivan's moving his stuff into your dad's old office when we get back, so get to packing."
Before I could even process the audacity, the camera jerked sideways. Ivan's greasy, sunburned face filled the frame. He was wearing a vintage silk button-down that undoubtedly belonged to my late father. "Yeah, and listen up, kid," Ivan sneered, pointing a thick, cigar-stained finger at the lens. "And when we get back, we're tearing down that depressing study of yours to build a home gym. So start boxing up all your dad's junk. And do me a favor, make sure you're packed too. We need the space. Grace says you can crash on the couch for a few days, but then you gotta bounce." He let out this arrogant, wheezing laugh that made my blood boil. I didn't yell, I didn't defend my father's memory, and I certainly didn't correct his arrogant assumption about who was bouncing where. I just sat perfectly still. The silence stretched so long and heavy that Ivan tapped his screen, thinking the connection had frozen. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. In my left hand, just out of frame, I held a cashier's check for a full year's rent, signed by a ruthless corporate attorney. The ink was still fresh. "I'll make sure the study is completely empty, and don't worry about my things. I'll be entirely moved out long before you return." Grace yanked the phone back, a victorious crocodile smile stretching across her heavily manicured face. "See, I told you he'd be reasonable," she chirped to Ivan before turning her dead eyes back at me. "It's for the best. You really need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet, honey. It's what your father would have wanted. We'll be extending our trip by another month, by the way. Have that office cleared out." The screen went black. The echo of her monumental entitlement hung in the empty kitchen. She genuinely believed she had just evicted me from my own inheritance, all while spending my father's fortune on a Mediterranean cruise with a man who was wearing his clothes. I set the phone face down on the counter. The house was already echoing, stripped of her tacky influence and restored to a pristine, neutral elegance. I picked up the landline and dialed the direct number for my father's estate lawyer. The phone barely rang once before he answered. "The lease is signed, the security deposit is cleared, and the storage unit is prepaid for 4 months," I informed him, methodically tracing the grain of the mahogany desk. "I'm handing the keys over to the attorney and his family this afternoon. If Grace or her new husband attempt to set foot on the property when they return, I want you to hit them with everything. Trespassing, harassment, whatever you have." He chuckled, a dry, ruthless legal rasp. The steel jaws of the trap snapped shut. Grace's little stolen kingdom was officially gone. 4 months later, right as the autumn chill began to bite the city air, my phone screen illuminated with a frantic FaceTime request. The caller ID flashed Grace's name. I answered it from the comfort of my new, spacious downtown apartment, sinking into the leather sofa before tapping the green icon. The video fed through, chaotic and shaking. Grace was standing on the pristine slate porch of my childhood home, her designer luggage piled haphazardly behind her, and she looked like she was about to explode. Behind her, Ivan was aggressively jiggling the brass doorknob, his European tan already starting to peel. "What the hell is going on?" she shrieked, her voice vibrating with panic. "My key doesn't work, and there's some strange woman inside telling me she's calling the police." I leaned into the camera and finally dropped the hammer. "That strange woman is the wife of a highly respected corporate attorney, Grace, and they hold a legally binding year-long lease on the property.
The camera jolted as Ivan tried to grab the phone, yelling obscenities, but Grace yanked it back, her eyes wide with a sudden creeping terror. "You can't do this! That is my house! I am your father's widow!" "Actually," I said, my voice dropping dead flat, "it's my house. The deed is in my name since the reading of the will. You were merely a guest, Grace, and your hospitality privileges expired the second you gave away my property and told me to pack my bags."
I watched through the pixelated screen as the exact moment of realization hit her. All the blood rapidly drained from her heavily tanned, Botox-stiffened face, leaving a sickly ashen gray in its wake. Her jaw actually went slack. 3 years of pure arrogance just instantly evaporated. She finally realized what she'd done. She opened her mouth to speak, to negotiate, to manipulate, but no words came out. She finally understood that she'd spent her lavish honeymoon bragging about evicting the actual landlord. The heavy front door of the estate opened then, and the attorney stepped out. He had his phone pressed to his ear, calmly giving the police dispatcher a physical description of 2 hostile trespassers on his rented property. "Before I let you deal with the authorities," I added, driving the final nail into her meticulously crafted coffin, "my lawyer just emailed you the address of a storage facility across town. I was generous enough to prepay for exactly 4 months of climate-controlled storage for all of your belongings." I paused, letting a razor-sharp smile touch my lips. "But since you extended your little romantic getaway by a month, your rental agreement expired yesterday. You might want to hurry before they auction off those precious designer clothes." No screaming match, no drawn-out drama. I just hung up the phone. They were left standing on the curb with their suitcases, the police sirens wailing in the distance, locked out of the multi-million-dollar kingdom they thought they had stolen. From what my lawyer tells me, they fled the state shortly after, burning through the last of my father's cash to survive in cheap motels. Meanwhile, I'm using the massive rental income to fully fund my cousin's college tuitions, playing my brand new PlayStation in an apartment paid for by Grace's sheer stupidity. You don't get to casually throw away pieces of someone else's life and expect to keep your own perfectly intact. She confidently walked herself straight off a financial cliff. You don't mess with a man's property. If you want to see another gold digger get absolutely wrecked, click the video on screen right now.